about the book. It makes me sad that no one wants to get on and talk about this book with me. Two's kind of nice because, and I'm going to talk to you about this because I'm going to record, it's recording anyway.
Okay.
Hold on, I'll make myself the like main thing.
Okay.
How do I do this? Okay, there we go. I wanted to post this anyway because as like a review for anyone else who just kind of needs it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share this regardless. So chapter
Okay.
is really important. Just because like it really sets up the setting of like basically the three different like big pieces of setting within the novel. So and Fitzgerald or Fitzgerald kind of uses the setting as like different symbolism throughout it. So chapter 2, it starts off with um, them driving through the Valley of Ashes, right? So the Valley of Ashes, think of like East and West Egg, and then like they're kind of like is like surrounding that bay, and then like the Valley of Ashes is like right at the bottom. So it's kind of like that center part, okay? And then no matter where you're going, they have to get through the Valley of Ashes to get over to New York City. So it's kind of like that catch-all area. And the Valley of Ashes is like super gray. It's like dirty. That's where like Wilson's garage is. So it's like this moral decay, very impoverished area. And what's kind of interesting is they try to hide it right through kind of like that beauty and the glamour of the 1920s. But that's where our poor characters kind of live within our novel, Myrtle and Wilson. Okay, so then you have Nick driving to New York City with Tom. Because who does Tom want to meet?
I don't know.
Tom wants to take Nick and
Gatsby.
show him off to who? No, Tom Buchanan.
I have no idea.
Probably one person he should not want to show Daisy's cousin.
Oh, his mistress?
Yeah, his mistress. He
Okay.
wants to show off Myrtle. He's like, you gotta come meet my girl. Like, that's weird, right? That Tom wants to show off Myrtle to
Yeah.
Daisy's cousin. So it's kind of like his like arrogance and his like he has no fear. He has no guilt that he has a woman on the side at all. So we meet George Wilson and Myrtle Wilson, and George is like kind of handsome, but he has no like real aspirations for life at all. He's kind of like settled into this life like with the body shop, and he's okay with that. But then you have Myrtle, who's this like desperate kind of socialite wannabe. She's kind of this try hard. And Tom like flaunts almost in Wilson's face that he's having an affair with his husband, with his wife, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're saying. Like that. I thought that was weird.
You're gonna come with me to the city, and Wilson's like, okay.
Like, all right.
Like he doesn't do
And he
anything.
like,
Not
yeah. He just sat there. Like
yeah,
he totally gave it away.
so
Mhm.
it's like at one point you're kind of like, do you kind of feel bad for Myrtle that her husband doesn't even like fight for her?
Yeah.
Like you want to be like, no, Tom, you can't have my wife. And he doesn't. It's really weird. So they go into the city, and New York City is like another setting of the story in that New York City's full of that like hustle bustle of the 1920s and the glamour, where it's very fast paced. You have the old money, the new money. You have people from the Valley of Ashes. Everyone's kind of just like meshed together. And they go to the apartment that Wilson or that Tom keeps for him and Myrtle. And everything in there is just very elaborate. Myrtle's picked it out because it's her kind of wanting to be on the in crowd. It's kind of like that someone who's trying too hard but really just doesn't fit in. Like she doesn't fit into that lifestyle. Um and it kind of is just their party that kind of transpons in this apartment. And Nick's only been drunk, I think he said, like one other time other than that date in the apartment. So you see kind of Myrtle wanting Tom's like opinion. She wants his approval. She changes her clothes several times, I think, to show off that she's can fit into this world, or she's wanting to fit into this world. um Also in this party is where someone overhears Nick say that he lives on West Egg. And they're like, oh, do you know Gatsby? And then that's kind of where starting the rumors of, who is Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
And they make comments that he was connected to like the Germans in World War I and that he's an Oxford man. So you kind of have this like rumor mill starting to build already in chapter 2 about who he is and kind of what's this mystery about him. More party stuff. Tom hits Myrtle, like cracks her across the face.
Mm-hmm.
So you see that Tom is this kind of like violent character and he's not, this great of a guy. But the whole time you're wondering like, why does Nick stay? Like he stayed the whole time.
Yeah.
He spent the night there. Like didn't leave. So as much as he's repulsed by all the actions, he's also very much like intrigued by them. Like he's fascinated by everything, so he doesn't leave. So that's chapter 2 essentially, is like setting up those like contrasts of the different kind of settings.
Yeah.
Then chapter 3, if you remember, was Gatsby's party.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about Gatsby's elaborate party?
I don't know. I don't know.
Almost like 3 pages. It's them, almost 4 pages. It's them just describing all of the food, all of the music, all of the band and the drinks and the butlers and all of the decorations and lights and music. So it's so elaborate, like it's very overly descriptive on the party to make it luxurious and to also kind of make you question as a reader, why is Gatsby throwing these parties where men and girls come and went like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars? It's one of my favorite lines of the whole book. Like they're attracted to it like a moth, like they have to go. And I think some of them go because they're intrigued by the party and it's the 20s and it's.
Well, doesn't he want to throw them so that way Daisy will show up?
Yes. So we don't know that right away, but you kind of have this idea, I think towards the end of chapter 3 and going into 4, that he's throwing them for Daisy. He's hoping she's going to like stumble into one.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people also are coming because they're intrigued by Gatsby and they kind of they have to be able to say, oh yeah, I was at Gatsby. I was there when.
Because no one actually really knows who he is.
Yeah, and I love that in the novel, it says no one even is invited to the parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just show up.
Just show up. The only one actually invited was
Nick. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's more intrigue. There's more kind of who is Gatsby, how do they know him? Who does Nick hang out with at the party?
I don't know. Is it? I have no idea.
Daisy's friend, Jordan, the tennis player.
Was that the one that was on the couch with her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in chapter 1, we met Jordan. She was with Daisy and they were like drunk with, happiness. And paralyzed with happiness.
Yeah.
Jordan. Yeah. She's a not a tennis player. She's a golf player. A famous golf player. So he kind of clings to her because he doesn't want to seem like a loner. And then as he's with her, he overhears people talking about, well, someone told me this about Gatsby and someone told me that and this and that. And so like that intrigue is building. We're building to the point where Gatsby's going to be introduced in this chapter. And there's these whole ideas of like perception versus reality, meaning how does Gatsby perceive himself to be right with these parties, but then what's the truth? A lot of the rumors are very far-fetched and there's no truth to them. So it kind of leaves you to wonder, like as a reader, what do you believe about Gatsby? What do you still wonder? Then as they're kind of sitting at a table, it's him and Jordan and this like young guy and this other girl. And Nick kind of says, oh, I think he looked familiar. And the guy asks him like, oh, like what service were you in? And they happen to be in a very similar armed service, in years previous. And the guy goes, oh, well, I'm Gatsby. Very like nonchalantly was like, oh yeah, I'm Gatsby. Like, what's the big deal? Like, how did you not know it was me? And Nick kind of points out that Gatsby has this like comment, or how do I say this? He described it as like an understanding smile, like a smile of like he's a very understanding guy, but he's very hopeful. So I think it gives Nick hope about the people of this society, of this time, and that maybe they could be a good person. And then it kind of wraps up the party with a butler coming over and telling Jordan that Gatsby would like a private word with Jordan. And Nick finds this a little odd, and she goes in and she talks to him. She comes out and she's like, I heard the most amazing thing. I can't tell you. I told him I wouldn't tell you, but it's the most amazing thing. And then she leaves. And then like the end of the party, everyone's like drunken leaving, crashing cars into the ditches. And it kind of, I think, shows the destructiveness of the 1920s and the people in there, that there's this like, they don't really have a good sense of being moral and what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, care.
Yeah, there's no care there at all. They're very careless with their decisions. And then the rest of the end of the chapter kind of wraps up with Nick going on and on about his life in New York and his job and his lunches and how he starts to date Jordan. Because he wants to kind of portray himself as that trustworthy narrator, that he's not just about all the glitz and the glamour of the parties, that he actually is a man of substance. He's a man, an honorable man that we can trust to tell this story. And he actually ends chapter 3 by saying, everyone suspects himself of at least one of the cardinal virtues, and this is mine. I am one of the few honest people that I've ever known. So it kind of is like catapulting us into this, like the novel's about to pick up, you know, kind of foreshadowing that Nick's a trustworthy guy. He's telling us everything about his life. Then in chapter 4 is kind of where we really start to see kind of Gatsby's intentions and kind of his plan and what he spoke to Jordan about. So I won't spoil that for you, Miss Lucy. But it's where you find out what Gatsby wanted from Jordan and what he wants from Nick. I will point out, though, that the first couple pages in chapter 4, sometimes people get confused. It's basically Nick listing off all the famous people from that summer that he saw at Gatsby's parties.
Okay.
So people
I normally
are like, what's this? I don't understand what's going on. He's just listing everyone that kind of has come to the parties, the rumors that he's heard about Gatsby. And then it shifts into when him and Gatsby are going to head into the city for lunch. And then that's when you start to see Gatsby's going to reveal to Nick a little bit about himself. But Nick doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust that he's getting the full truth, and that Gatsby's kind of elaborating on things. And Nick doesn't understand why Gatsby wants him to think so fondly of him. Nick's kind of like, what do you care what I think of you? Or why are you telling me these elaborate things? And then over the lunch, you'll kind of figure out why Gatsby wants Nick to like him or to think, you know, highly of him.
Well, because he wants Daisy, right?
Yes, and he wants Nick to orchestrate a meeting, essentially. So there's a whole plan there. So that's 2, 3, and 4. A lot of backstory kind of into the setting, into Gatsby.
Yeah.
And then 4, 5, 6, and 7 are kind of the big chapters.
Okay. Got anything else?
I don't. I'm so glad everyone joined us on this chat.
Oh. Okay, well,
I'm going to give you extra points for being the only one on here.
Yes. And it was recorded, so even stack them on.
It is recorded.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Luce. Have a good week.
You too.